And we are back for the Thousand Worlds Book Club, and we're talking about Override. The link for the story is below. I'm joined by Jaffer Flowers. Oh crap, how's it going, Jaffer?
Oh, quite well, thank you. It's delightful to be here. I'm a huge fan of the Corpse Handler trilogy. Unenjoyable read.
Yes, Override is the second story in our Corpse Handler trilogy, though it was actually written in 1973, 3 years before Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg. But Pittsburg simply feels like a better introduction to corpse handling.
So I find that it's not just the setting of Override that's similar to Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg, but the overall themes and messages of the story are similar as well. We are once again dealing with the plight of the working class being controlled by the system. And this, of course, is the entire metaphor of a corpse being controlled by a handler. Though I will say that Override is much more optimistic than Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg, as it deals with themes of breaking free of that control. In fact, the story begins with a quote, unattributed of course, I imagine simply George R.R. Martin, that says, the only way to break free of a controlling force is to first recognize exactly what that force is. The force is not just those controlling the corpses, but those controlling the workers, and those limiting the freedom in our lives.
So our story follows our protagonist Captivate on the world Grotto. Grotto is unlike New Pittsburg in that it is a beautiful, nature-filled world rather than a rainy, depressing slum. Captivate is quite unlike Sykes from Pittsburg in that he is somewhat content and optimistic about the future. He is a corpse handler though, and he owns 3 corpses and is doing pretty well for himself. It's in Override that we begin to learn what it's like to telepathically control a dead body. The controller does feel the sensations of the other bodies, but they are duller than normal. This is, by the way, the opposite of what Bran feels when he telepathically enters Summer. His emotions and sensations are largely heightened. So Captivate mines valuable swirl stones for a living. But he's a bit different from everyone else in that he's a really hard worker, takes his time, and enjoys Grotto's nature. He returns from his days with more stones than his peers, which his company largely profits from. Still, he receives a modest bonus from his extra output. He has put some money away, and he dreams of retiring and joining the regular colonists on the planet. So Captivate meets his best friend Cochrane at the bar. Cochrane is not doing as well, he's lazier and drinks more, and Cochrane feels that the swirlstone industry is dying and corpse handling will come to an end. Cochrane urges our protagonist to go along with him on a stone smuggling scheme, but Captivate has no interest in rocking the boat of his life. Enter Bartling. Bartling is an investor who hates corpse handling. He has arranged to buy the company in order to shut down corpse handling and get it off the planet. The entire bar of corpse handlers is devastated by this news, as it's their livelihood. And so Captivate stands up to Bartling. He tells him that if he buys the company, it doesn't matter. He's going to stay on the planet and figure out something else to do with his corpses besides mining. Bartling is furious and storms off, but Captivate in truth is concerned about his economic well-being. Corpses, being clumsy, aren't actually good for very much besides mining. And so Captivate starts thinking of a new plan. He hypothesizes that if all the workers unite and pool their savings, they could buy the company themselves. Cochrane is not so hot on this idea as he has no savings, and so they go back to talking about the smuggling plan. Captivate reluctantly agrees. And so the two set out for Captivate's mining spot the next morning. The caves where they are digging are well out there and unknown to others. Still, Cochrane claims that he hears other people. We learn a bit more about Captivate and Cochrane. Again, Captivate enjoys his work and works long and hard days, and he has 3 good corpses that he has maintained well. Cochrane, on the other hand, is a complainer with a whole bunch of excuses, and he owns 2 substandard corpses. It's rather clear that Cochrane is a desperate man. We then find out a bit more about corpse handling. We find out that the telepathic energy to control multiple bodies at once is rather mentally taxing. Varamir Sixskins talks about this problem as well, which is why it's so impressive that he can control 6 beings at once.
It must be incredibly taxing to perhaps control an entire army.
Anyway, while digging, Captivate happens to dig out the largest swirl stone he has ever dug. The stone is worth an absolute fortune. Just as Captivate is about to tell Cochrane, he is attacked. And to his surprise, it's from one of his own corpses. In fact, all 3 of his corpses have turned against him. On top of this, he looks over to find Cochrane, who has been seemingly killed by his 2 corpses, who are now heading towards Captivate. Our story then goes into action, where our protagonist fights off a corpse with a drill and proceeds to nearly drown with another corpse. Our protagonist swims off to hide and is convinced that Bartling is the person that has organized this hit. Captivate then calms down and remembers that he still has his corpse controller. He concentrates and is able to see through the eyes of the corpses again for just a moment. Captivate then goes on the offensive. One of the corpses is in a boat, and so he jumps in and knocks it out with a wrench, and there he finds Cochrane alive. Captivate accuses Cochrane of having an override box and wresting his corpses from him. Cochrane's death was a fake-out, as he was only hit with the side of the axe. So this seems to be the exact same fake-out death that Arya receives at the Red Wedding. She also gets an axe to the head, it's just not with the sharp part. Anyway, next all of the mysteries of the story are cleared up. Captivate figured everything out because he saw Cochrane huddling alive when he looked through the corpse's eyes. And we find out that Cochrane had gone to Bartling about Captivate's plan to buy the company with pooled funds. Bartling panicked and paid Cochrane to kill Captivate. And Bartling provided Cochrane with an override box. Captivate and Cochrane then battle, and Cochrane becomes mortally wounded. Our hero attempts to save Cochrane, but fails. Our story ends with our protagonist more driven than ever to oppose Bartling and organize the corpse handlers. He heads home with only 1 corpse instead of 3, and that corpse is his friend Cochrane. So Jaffer, what are your thoughts on the story? Well, I do think it's quite an interesting tale. The story is a bit more about free will and personal motivation than, say, Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg or The Stone City. In those stories, the world is a dead-end place, much like this Bayonne, New Jersey. But this planet Grotto feels like a place of opportunity. Our protagonist just needed a little bit of motivation. Although an override box was used to control Captivate corpses, his will was still strong enough to override the override. And of course, the same thing happens with his life. People tried to control him, but his will is so strong that he's unable to be controlled. He is the one with the ultimate override. It is worth noting again that this story was written 3 years before Nobody Leaves New Pittsburg and the Stone City. Our author may have been at a more optimistic point in his life. The story does seem to again focus on George R.R. Martin's existentialism and man being in control of his own destiny. Just as Jaime has a blank page that he can choose to fill with anything he wants, Captivate is now in control of his own fate. Before he was content, but now he has a chip on his shoulder and is ready to fight, unionize, and win. I don't know if I'm just imagining it, but I see a bit of Martin Heidegger in this story. He believed that people should spend more time in graveyards, facing death, and really figuring out what they wanted to do with their lives. Our protagonist is complacent until he actually faces death. It's only after facing death that he truly finds the will to take control of his life. He goes from corpse to handler. It is remarkably one of the happiest endings we've had in a George R. R. Martin story so far. Yes, Captivate's best friend is dead, and he's down some corpses, and he has a hard fight ahead, and his fate is unknown. Still, you feel like the character has the willpower to actually win. Now I'd like to talk a bit about the concept of wresting a telepathic subject from someone else. In A Song of Ice and Fire, we hear a bit about subjects resisting telepathic control. For example, Hodor does not like Bran's control, resists and fails, and Thistle doesn't like Varamir Sixskin's control, resists and wins. But these are battles between a telepath and a non-telepath. What happens when 2 telepaths battle in a battle of wills? Here in our story, we have Cochrane stealing Captivate corpses, and then our protagonist very briefly regains a bit of control. I'm reminded a bit of the more violent telepathic battle between Royd and his mother in Night Flyers. In A Song of Ice and Fire, we actually do have an example of 2 telepaths battling. When Varamir was younger, he actually stole a wolf from another telepath and pushed his consciousness out to gain another skin. I bring this up as many see dragons as the natural antidote to wights, but the defeat of an undead army may be more about wresting them telepathically from the other's control. In fact, I wonder if this hasn't already been done, and if some of the white attacks were not actually the others, but another party such as the children. Anyway, that's all for Override. I'd like to thank Jaffer Flowers. Oh, you're welcome, any time, my good man. And next time we will conclude the Corpse Handlers with one of George R. R. Martin's best but darkest stories, Meathouse Man. The link for the audio and the written is below. See you then.